start again. And we're live. This is Number One Lobster and me, Claire Core, to talk about individualism. Now, Number One Lobster is a very interesting fellow. He's only 19, but when I first met him, I thought he was somebody perhaps about my age because he was so, well, his grammar was so perfect and his English so accurate and clear and so unusual, and I really was taken aback to discover that he was only 19. But here he is. Hello, Number One Lobster.
Hello, Claire. How are... I am very pleased to be on this stream because your YouTube channel is almost twice as well subscribed as mine. I'm afraid to say you might be slightly disappointed by my spoken English. I do tend to... Well, the benefit of writing on the internet, it seems to be a benefit that only I really take advantage of. I've noticed most young people my age don't. Is the fact that it's much easier to see the grammar before you and everything, you know, when you're writing it out, and you can really clean things up. You might hear me say you're more likely to hear me say LOL in real life than you are to see me actually write it down.
Right. Oh,
to make a bit of a
LOL
confession.
instead of lol, because I've heard young people say, you know, instead of go ha ha, they say lol.
Yeah, oh gosh, I'll do stuff like that too. It's like you'd never see me use you'll probably hear me say like, oh, sus, that's a sussy baka, like random like young people slang like that. You're much more likely to hear me.
I guess I'm not young enough. What does that mean?
Sus originally was just short for suspicious. It came from a popular game, a popular online video game called Among Us, which was basically based off of...
It did not come from Among Us.
My younger brother in the background is correcting me. It exploded to popularity, at least, with Among Us. People were like, oh, Among Us sus. This person is the imposter, because basically the goal of the video game Among Us is you're either... It's like on a space station, you're all like little cartoon astronauts, and it really is sort of like a kid's game, but for some reason it got popular with a bunch of 20-something-year-old millennials streaming on the internet.
Mm-hmm. And the game is what, to discover who is
it's
the
basically
suspect?
It's to discover who is the imposter, to discover who is secretly an alien murderer.
Yes. I think
it's basically like The Thing, the movie The Thing. Did you ever see that?
Yes. Spectacular special effects. Or I thought, you know, the
yes, it's basically like The Thing, except as a child-friendly video game.
Uh-huh. I think there is a version of it called Cluedo. I think it's kind of murder weekend game, and you know, there's a bunch of people spending the weekend together at a hotel where, you know, one of them gets murdered, one of them did.
Yes.
It's all about finding out who did it. Yeah.
Yes, Among Us is very much like that. Anyway. But then where that baka comes from it's the Japanese word basically for like stupid or foolish. Uh-huh. So like and so you know, anime and manga, you know, like lots of Japanese media is very popular with young people, so they end up taking random Japanese words and using it as slang.
Right. I see. Okay. And you want to talk about individualism, and you're saying there are two kinds, suggesting that, and you call them one you call rugged and the other you call modern, and I guess the modern kind is not so rugged, and I think rugged means tough and that sort of thing. Hello? I lost him. Oh, Number One Lobster? I can't hear you.
Sorry, I had to mute myself for a second because my mom just came in the room. She was telling me to basically it's just I need to slice some onions for dinner later.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So sorry for that bit of an interruption. Yes. So also as a result, I only heard about half of your introduction to the. But I suppose it was sort of my idea to talk about individualism, modern versus rugged. Basically, is like a thing that I've noticed is that it seems like in the past, individualism was quite different from what it's developed into today, and it seems like there's a sort of right wing versus left wing individualism. You know, like it seems to me, the wholesome right wing individualism it's what I would characterize as being rugged. You know, it's like
Masculine,
you're not.
you mean?
Yes, masculine. You know, it's like it is like the survivalist who can go into the woods and just survive. You know, like he knows how to figure out like which rocks can be made into tools. You know, and he knows how to build a fire and how to trap game and all sorts of things like that. Knows how to sanitize water. Whereas the modern, I suppose what makes that sort of old-fashioned, rugged, masculine individualism is perhaps the fact that it's contained within reality or something like that. Whereas modern individualism is, well, it's unbounded by reality. Effectively, it is, you know, and there's all kinds of people more intellectual, better educated than me who could tell you it's like it has such and such origin in the French Revolution.
Can
you know.
give an example of each? That would.
Oh, well, what's it like? The modern leftist. We could characterize it as feminine, but I think that archetypally, women are sort of far too cynical and practical minded. Well, and I suppose also since like what's it like? It's like modern individualism. You know, it's like we get into like identity politics, basically. You know, of like people, like women pretending to be men, men pretending to be women, and people being obsessed with like LGBTQ sort of things.
Right, so it's almost as if the state is saying, you rebel, please rebel, you know, in weird sexual, gender confused ways.
Oh
And
yes,
people
not
do
just that.
And
You
in
know,
a
like
way,
there's
it's a kind of conformity, isn't it?
yes, or even you know like with the hipsters, you know, who like you know there was literally once a lawsuit where a hipster sued a magazine that made an anti-hipster uh article for using a picture of him, but it turned out it was a picture of a completely different person from a completely different country that just so happened to have the exact same skin tone, facial hair, and outfit
Right, and he was
as
suing
that particular. Yeah, you know, so like with the hipsters, you know, that sort of thing is like
with the
rebelling a
beard
bit.
and, yeah.
You know, like dressing kind of like old people, but kind of like in a very like this weird juxtaposition of like 19th century garments with like all kinds of like modern hairstyles and hair dye and weirdness and like thick horn rim glasses and all kinds of stuff. And it's like they're trying to rebel or whatever, but they end up like all conforming and the sort of like the sort of rainbow barf unicorn dung aesthetic, I would call it. I would characterize it of like the LGBTQ culture.
Yes. So,
Yeah, you know, and it's like it's trying to appeal to some kind of individualism, but it almost seems like the inversion. Like it seems completely unremoved from like the rugged individualism of like the man who goes into the forest and can simply live.
yes, or even perhaps a man who stands up for a principle.
Yes, you know, like what's it? I understand that for some bizarre reason, you know, among certain people on our side of politics, we might call it the dissident right wing,
Yeah.
are not fond of emancipation anymore for some reason. Like, I hesitate to call these people racist because it's a rather meaningless word, but for some reason there are people who like defend the Confederate States of America and stuff on our side of politics. But I think it's quite fair to point out that for all of their faults, the sort of radical abolitionists like John Brown, who I suppose you might not have heard of because you're British, but he was basically like a radical anti-slavery activist who basically like tried to start like a massive slave revolt, completely failed. His like little troop ended up getting massacred and he ended up getting executed. But, you know, like he was still a man of principle, you know, like if nothing else, you know, for all the man's faults, at least he was doing something he believed in for no ulterior motive.
Yeah. And these days, I think if you stick to your principle, they're going to call you extremist and fanatic. I think that I think everybody is going to be tarred with that brush now.
Yes.
And I think we should have, you know, arguments, you know, prepared, because it's always the case that, you know, whether you say yes or no to whatever proposal that the state makes, if you disagree with the state, you're the extremist, not them.
Yes.
It's always us.
Yes, it's all quite ridiculous. Anyway, so that is just sort of a thing. Is I don't know. I wondered, basically, because like, you know, I've noticed it's like there's two different, like in the right or whatever we want to call it. You know, like on our side of politics, it seems like there is two different opinions. Basically, you know, it's like you tend to have like the libertarian individualists versus the more authoritarian, the sort of collectivist right. And dissidents and things, you know, and it's like the more authoritarian collectivist right says is like, oh, look at all this identity politics, isn't that individualistic and isn't it also evil? Whereas the libertarian right points at it and it says, oh, but look at all the conformity, isn't that collectivistic and isn't it also evil? You know.
Yeah, it's confusing,
so, like,
isn't it?
Yeah. It's sort of ridiculous. So basically, it's just, I guess, the my goal or something on this live stream is basically is just I want to call attention to this, and I basically just want to say is like, hey, like certain brands of individualism are certainly evil, but certain other brands of individualism are certainly good, and we need to be able to parse them out and separate them, so we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
And we need to know what is good and what is evil and how we define these ideas.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of the confusion that is caused is by two people using the same word but having different meanings when they use a word.
Yes, well, that's something that Tim Pool talks about quite a lot. You know, it's as sort of milquetoast and bland as Tim Pool is. That's something he harps on. Oh, he's an American journalist person. He's basically somebody that would have been quite firmly left wing about 20 years ago, but his opinions haven't changed at all, and so nowadays he's considered to be quite right wing.
Yes, there is this thing called the Overton window, right? And it is being moved about, and, you know, we're never in the middle. It's only the government and its supporters who are in the middle, and everybody who doesn't like the government is on the outside. But it moves around.
Yes, there's quite a lot of it seems like the people who complain the most about, oh, you're othering such and such, are the people who tend to other the most. To bastardize the English language slightly and use other as a verb rather than a... Well, to use it as a different type of verb, I suppose.
Well, it's a bad verb. It's like to other somebody is mean and well, right wing, I guess. You know,
yes, but it's quite ironic given the way that they tend to other, well, us, frankly.
Well, it's a hypocrisy of it that is so insufferable. You know,
yes.
All the things that they accuse us of, they do to a greater degree.
Yes, and I don't... It might have been Marcuse, I don't know. It's some such and such No, it wasn't Marcuse. It was, I think it started with a G. There was actually some
Gramsci?
left-wing activist from Gramsci, however you're supposed to pronounce that, who actually formulated hypocrisy is basically baked into left-wing ideology. They say, oh, we want to tolerate things, but it's impossible for us to tolerate these two things at the same time.
Yes, I would agree. Wanting trans kids dead is pretty objectionable.
Jonathan, you're strawmanning.
I'm literally
Fuck
not.
off. You literally are.
Most conservative ideals come to, I don't like things changing and I want minorities dead.
Minorities. My gosh, no.
Well,
My gosh. You see this? You see what I have to deal with in my family?
Yeah.
He never got past his edgy atheist phase when he was 14.
Right. Well, but perhaps perhaps I might invite him on.
Oh, perhaps, but what's it like? I joked on Instagram about you and I would just shout heretic at each other and get nothing done. I think that would literally happen with him.
It's people like that. They like the drama. They like the shit.
I don't. I hate it. I hate drama.
Outside.
Well, I prefer.
Talk to literally anybody who's normal.
Jonathan, we live in Alabama. Everyone who is normal agrees with me. Jonathan, Jonathan, literally everyone, literally even our neighbor who is a gay nature photographer is like, oh, the transsexualism, that seems to be taking things too far.
I think it would make anybody uneasy. It's like, yeah, okay, I'm gay, I'm transgender, but please don't, push it too far because they might just snap. The Lord might just snap one day if you push them too far,
Well, that's just a normal thing for humans anyway, no, but to get back on the topic, of like Gramscianism or whatever, it's like the right wing. I'm not saying it's free of hypocrisy because humans are hypocritical by their nature.
Mm-hmm.
So, naturally enough, we're going to find hypocrisy on the right occasionally.
Are humans
but it's not
by nature, or are you applying your own attributes to everybody without thinking?
But I'm not talking to you.
I know, but you're just saying such absurd, insane bullshit, I can't ignore you.
Anyway, Jonathan, humans are flawed, are they not? Humans are mortal.
Yeah, it's just...
So therefore, they're going to make mistakes. Therefore, there is no ideology which does not have them.
To other people, they don't...
Jonathan, that's projection is literally like a human universal. Like every flaw, everyone always projects their own attributes onto people they don't like.
Doing exactly what I just said.
I know. Consciously, I'm saying you do the same thing to me. I'm saying everyone does the same thing to everybody else.
There's a teleporter at checkpoint that'll take you to service.
Anyway, yeah, you might hear. You're not just going to hear my brother disagreeing with me. You're going to hear some more random stuff from him as well because he's playing a video game with chat.
Okay.
So sorry about that. Anyway, but as I was saying, because conservative ideologies are based around like core beliefs that it's like exclusivity basically is we want this thing and not other things.
Mm-hmm.
Hypocrisy is not baked into them. You don't have the thing like you do at Gramsci where you basically have to openly be hypocritical about your values because it's impossible to tolerate two things at once. In right-wing ideology, because we are explicitly tolerating one thing and not other things.
Can you tell me what you mean by tolerating two things at the same time? I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, what's it like the thing my brother would say is like, oh, you cannot be tolerant of the gays and also tolerant of homophobes. And so the Gramscian answer to that is just to embrace hypocrisy and just be openly tolerant of one thing and intolerant of the other.
Mm-hmm.
Without forming any kind of exclusive value structure, just claiming to be generally tolerant of everything.
I see. Yes, I understand now.
Although I do have to admit,
There are
I've
6
not
Call of Duty
actually
domination
read
points around the
Gramsci.
map, and if
I
you don't get all of them before 18 minutes into
I am a relatively
chaos
lay
forever.
conservative. I pay attention to people who are much more intelligent than me, and
Yeah, in order to activate them,
I
we need
derive
one
my
computer
opinions
generator
off
on,
of
but
what
we
they
already got
say.
that part.
I might be bastardizing my description of Gramscian ideology slightly.
But what we need, I think, is
Facts.
hierarchy and the essential difficulty of
Well,
liberalism
yes,
and
because
leftism.
categories matter.
Yeah, I mean, you can't have an army that is egalitarian because then nobody would do anything and then they
Well,
just
yes, that's why the barbarians were always beaten by Rome, even when the barbarians outnumbered the Romans 10-1, because the barbarians were a warrior culture, whereas the Romans were a soldier culture. You know, the barbarians lacked rigid, strict hierarchies and a chain of command. So basically, once you killed the single charismatic leader, this massive horde of 100,000 people would crumble. Whereas in Rome,
I killed computer.
with like all this decentralization, and you have like the centurion, and he was captain of 100, and the legion, and like
That's
with the decimalization basically of the Roman military.
Oh no.
Basically just made it like a lot more efficient. And they were able to like properly run things, and they were organized,
So we have
and
4 decontamination. There's a bajillion chaos,
yeah.
I mean, it's so obvious that
Oh,
everybody
Jesus.
would be regarded everybody else as equals.
Also, wait, how did you
they're
revive me?
to each
Because
Yes.
and not following anybody's
Not 'cause
orders.
I thought
Doing their own
Yes.
thing.
only let you. I could
Yes,
change what I was spectating. I thought it didn't let me do that. If you could still revive me.
But of course, it's like, what's it like? The trouble there, it's like equality ideology, I guess, as we might put it, is like,
Please put me
well,
out.
like I was saying before, there are certain universal
Sir, behind
things,
Please kill me. Please kill me.
all humans are human, and so like within certain specific domains, all humans are kind of equal, like all humans are innately flawed, etc.
Well, in terms of God, I suppose, it's
Oh,
God
this
is only going to
yeah.
judge you
Barely
according
didn't
to
get out
what
alive.
you are personally capable of. And,
Yes.
It's kind of more subjective. It's like,
Yes, and
you
you know what? It occurs to me.
I saw you die there. That sucks. If you were like
Yes,
half
and
a
I think it's
second
very
faster,
interesting you
would
mentioned
barely
that,
make it.
because
You
I
just have
think
to
what that
press the button
effectively
before
is
it says
that's a
zero.
really great argument for Christianity in America. Because, like, basically,
this
it's
guy
like the
needs to
modern
hide in
argument
a
is like,
corner
oh,
and not
America
die.
is a country that has freedom of religion, therefore everything's got to be
No, because if he
secularized, and you
dies, then
can't
the
be
last generator
explicitly
doesn't
Christian
matter.
about anything. But the thing
He needs
is,
to survive. We spawn
the
in,
American
we find
idea
the
of
last
equality
generator.
under the
That's what
law
we
and
do.
all that sort of thing
Survive,
only
we
works
spawn in,
if there
or
is a
not.
single divine entity that sees everything and is like highly elevated above mortal men. Not necessarily the Christian God, but I don't think the founding fathers necessarily had a Christian God in mind. They were they were all Freemasons. They basically just thought that there's like one vaguely conscious entity that judges good and evil and has a slightly objective sense of morality.
Yeah, I think the
And,
founding
yeah.
fathers were kind of rejecting the Trinity. I think that was, the
Well,
most...
I'm sure that some of them would. Some of them were like borderline atheists. But of course, it's like different. But even then, like in America is such a like religiously diverse place. It's like, what do you mean by Trinity? Because like well, because like you've got like Jehovah's Witnesses are like a very uniquely American religious sect.
Well, because they were
And-
allowed to
yeah.
flourish in America, but in the old world they would have been crushed.
Yes. Well, because America is a land of freedom, or like
But First
my
Amendment
religion.
and everything.
Yes. And of course, like the only European country that was like that is the Netherlands, of course, but well, that basically just led to the ancestors of America, the Pilgrims, didn't like living in the Netherlands because even though you had freedom of religion, the cities were also full of booze and harlotry and nonsense that they didn't like.
Yeah, so
Because
they thought if they stayed in Leiden,
Funny
they
tea
think
class
they
with
were
funny
there.
radio.
They thought
Well-
they'd lose their identity.
Yes, well, basically because the pilgrim, what's it,
Trying.
the pilgrims were, the Puritans were accepted very, like kindly by the Dutch, but the Dutch were like kind of degenerates, and
Put it on 1-1.
yeah, like the young people among the pilgrims basically were being led astray by them, and the pilgrims, so basically we're like, we're just gonna leave then.
Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, now as I was saying,
I have a shitty janitor card. I just wanted his zone card because I have a shitty janitor card.
I lost my train of thought slightly, but like,
I just wanted to
like
steal
basically
his
it's like the thing that I was sort of saying before, it's like in America, it's like you can have a sort of a conservative, I think, ideology of equality. It's just that you need to have some kind of religious framework, or at least deistic or divine framework about it in order to justify it, because looking at things from a purely scientific, purely earthly standpoint, humans are obviously not equal, like
See, I can clean up the evidence. I can clean up that.
like who I am today is not even equal to who I was yesterday,
Well,
So how
Confucius
can
had
it
this
be that
idea
two men
of-
are equal to each other?
Yes, so this reminds me of Confucius. He was basically talking about a social system where the emperor would be right at the top, and there would be a hierarchical system, and the family was important, and a man had to work out how best to treat his wife and his elder brother and his younger brother and his father.
Sometimes
and
the layout
that
just
kind of
fucks
idea.
it, and it's like impossible to find.
Yes. Also, it occurs to me, perhaps I should mute myself when I'm not speaking, so that you don't have to hear my brother prattle.
Okay.
Do you have anything else to say, or were you just
Also,
going on a
light
bit
is
about
completely different now.
Confucianism?
Well, that's all. I'll listen to you now.
The light.
Well, no. Anyway, so I guess basically it's just like a thing is Let's see. Did we go over most of the points we wanted to? We went over like individualism, and I guess basically to sum things up, my opinion on individualism is like, hey, there is a legitimate right-wing narrative for it, and we shouldn't abandon the whole concept of individualism just because the left has co-opted it, basically, just because the left is making use of it today.
No, you don't.
Perhaps individualism is not a tool that can be used at the moment, but it's not a tool that will never be useful again. We ought to, like... Perhaps it's not the gun that we want in our holster at this exact moment, but we need to keep it, like, safe, basically. And like, if nothing else,
or give an example of the good individualism. Perhaps some famous example. I think that would be helpful.
Well, like famous examples would be like what we might characterize as right-wing individualism is like the mountain men of the Old West. It was these guys, these rugged guys who would go into the mountains living completely alone, and they could sustain themselves. They were skilled hunters and trappers, and they just knew how to live in the wilderness completely alone. And I would say that is,
isn't it?
Yes.
But perhaps I guess I was looking for something more political, I suppose.
Well, I suppose if there is a political counterpart to that, I suppose that it would perhaps just be liberty, something or other. Like, I feel like, what's it? Political decisions or whatever, political ideology, political principles that facilitate that sort of thing, that facilitate personal independence of the individual in a real survivalist material way, rather than a soft identity related way.
I'm not quite sure what you mean.
Well, like, because like we were talking about before, of like the individualism of identity with like all these people that have got the pronouns in the bio, basically, and they're ironically all the same.
Uh-oh.
Whereas, yeah.
I guess I was thinking in terms of individualism, what Nietzsche said about Superman, the will to
What is it?
power,
What is it?
that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. Was
That-
this about
that might be
something you had
something
in
about
mind?
I'm gonna go around to A.
That's not necessarily what I had in mind, but well, Nietzsche is popular on the right wing for good reasons, I would imagine.
Well, I think, it is about leadership, isn't it? It's like, you have this thing, just do it, as Nike would say.
Yes.
But
Or
I think
like, of
we
course,
just
is
need to
Jordan
explain-
Peterson as well, to the guy who inspired the name of my YouTube channel. With Jordan Peterson, for
Peterson.
example, would say, he would say, don't compare yourself to others, compare yourself to who you were yesterday. Personal self-improvement, I suppose. Yes, self-improvement culture, basically, is perhaps a good example of like right-wing individualism, wholesome individualism,
Alright, so who wants to bet that SCP's also circled around to A?
if that makes sense.
Yes,
Oh, hey, a
yes,
generator.
I mean, obviously, you shouldn't compare yourself to.
We don't have any
somebody
computer
who's
generators.
Sort of way out of your league, because that would
Alright,
be
so rush
demoralizing.
computer generators, get the decompression
Yes.
terminals, don't die.
Yeah.
Peanut.
So is that everything addressed? Was there anything else on this topic you wanted to
Actually, sorry,
discuss, or shall we move on to a different topic? For example, Dawnshire.
Yes. Do tell me about Dawnshire.
Okay, so
I saw him.
I've produced a couple of podcasts basically on my YouTube channel about Dawnshire. It occurs to me now, perhaps I should have shown it to you so that you could actually look at it to I don't know, do a bit of preliminary study or something. But basically, what Dawnshire is it's basically just like a bit of a goal that I've sort of dreamt up with a couple of my friends on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
That basically is like we want to establish a little autonomous community, self-sustaining in like materially self-sustaining.
Oh, hey, Nuke's arm.
Mm-hmm.
Like little sort of like homesteading community in the middle of like the Rocky Mountains or something like that, just somewhere
Elevators.
in the backwoods of America.
Mm-hmm.
It basically would just be like meant to be just like a bastion of
I just got a shotgun.
conservatism and basically just wholesomeness in general.
Mm-hmm. Like the Amish.
Yeah, but like less extreme.
Okay.
Like what's it like the thing with Dawnshire is like I think one of the old bits we came up with is
Somebody called
like you can have your Netflix just only on the weekends.
Right.
Or like it's
Regulated degeneracy.
Yeah, I figured.
Perhaps.
a little bit, I guess, but also it's like, well, no, it occurs to me is what we could do is we could just do what Saudi Arabia does, and we could just have censored Netflix. We could we could edit out all the gay kisses from Disney movies or something.
Yes. Well, that's what
wait.
censors are for.
Yeah,
Yes.
I remember if they don't
Um,
answer,
I mean, what is the problem? Why don't the censors do their jobs now? I mean,
Oh, they do. They censor us.
yes.
They
Oh,
do their
Cheyenne-
job in a very
Cheyenne-
corrupt
Cheyenne.
manner because that's just about what
Cheyenne cooled
everything
down at
is.
A. Cheyenne cooled down at A.
Anyway,
yeah.
so that basically, there's a bunch of different things that we've sort of formulated with Dawnshire, and one thing that we've sort of worked out recently is, well, I guess I should say is like we wanted to be like a semi-monarchical thing.
Oh, you mean
Except
with
partially-
monarchical?
Order
You mean
66.
a king?
And yes, except of
That's un-American.
the sort of- well, let me explain it to you, and I'll explain to you how we sort of reworked it into being American, because that was a deeply concerning thing that I worried about at first. And basically, what I figured out is like, no,
I fucked him.
what's it like? You can recharacterize American ideology as having Jesus is king,
Is there just like a zombie somewhere?
and you can, without bastardizing it too much, you can characterize
Zombie
the
XD.
American opposition to monarchy throughout history as being, it's like, oh, for a mortal man to call himself king is a usurpation of Christ's place in the world.
Right, but then you'd have to, well, you would in effect have an established religion, an official religion, for you to talk in these terms.
Doctors. So then they
Yes, and that's something that we've been working on slightly. At first, we were just like, oh, it'll just be a bit generally Christian. Just anybody who can, like, honestly say Christ is Lord can live there. But something that we've sort of been working on a
Or
bit
else
more
they'll be
also.
burnt at the stake.
Yeah, so like, allow me to continue. So like, basically, just like the sort of the thing that we've been working out. Because at one point,
Everybody go to Class D and then
because
go
at
to
one
where
point
the
I was
art
basically
is in
like,
Class
is
D room.
like,
Yeah, go to Class D
shouldn't we shouldn't there be like a place in this ideal society for like Muslims and Jews as well? Shouldn't we be a bit more broadly accepting of Abrahamic people in general? And so basically, like the
Everybody
thing
go
we
to the
worked
D
out
class
is like,
first
all
one.
right, well, there's a bit of a what you might call a pseudo monarch under the title of steward, and basically what the steward is he's like he inherits his title not necessarily through blood. It's that he's the apprentice of the last steward, which would theoretically most of the time be one of the steward's own sons, but it could just be a random child that the steward was like, he's
guys,
bright, I
press
want
the
him to
I,
be my
whatever.
apprentice. And basically what the steward is like a bit of an executive. He doesn't have all that much power, but he basically is powerful enough to like stop the other like organizations in the government from making stupid decisions. But as well, he's also
Peanut,
But it'd also be something as like chief of police / commander-in-chief of the forces, essentially, with like a because like what we were thinking is like, well, what Dawnshire, it's like military is basically like really masculine, and since we want to create like a traditionalistic masculine state, probably like military service ought to be like a mandatory. Like everyone should be trained to use weapons. Sort of like Switzerland.
You'd have a militia.
Yes, and basically, like the officers would be the only permanent career soldiers. Basically, would just be the officer corps, and they would also basically function as the police. Since what else are you going to do with people when you're not at war? It's like, well, just they can keep the peace in the villages or whatever. But basically, it'd just be like a weekend thing. It's like on Monday mornings or something, everyone would gather in the village square to do like a bit to basically warm up military exercises or something, to do a bit of target practice and to do some like drill or whatever, like marching in formation, that sort of thing. And then
or just do a patrol, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that too. But I guess is the officers would theoretically be like patrolling the neighborhood every day. Whereas I guess it could be like, I guess it'd be like a grand parade or whatever. It would be like once a week, everyone in the community would gather up and get into ranks and stuff and do a bit of like the whole town would do a patrol of the whole town, I guess, like once a week or something.
Gosh.
And we're still hashing this. Yeah, well, yeah, we're still hashing this all out, of course. But also it's like, well, because I guess it's like it's like with the freedoms that Dawnshire wants to have. It's basically like making like an entire society basically of people that voluntarily associate with one another in the most objective way possible. I guess is like that we want to make an entire society of people who have all the skills necessary to survive on their own, and therefore they only really participate in the society as a matter of like convenience, not because they have to. People who depend on one another willingly and not by force, effectively, due to a lack of skills. Because it seems to me that in modern society, people depend on one another unwillingly because they don't have skills necessary to survive on their own. And I think that breeds like a weird underlying resentment in society. Whereas if we were like if everyone on Earth, like in America, knew how to survive in the woods and was like trained with weapons and knew how to defend themselves, etc., I feel like they would all be a lot more fond of one another because there'd be an understanding that like all this association, it is purely voluntary. I don't need you. You don't need me. We just associate to make each other's life more convenient.
Because we choose to live in this way.
Yes.
And we kind of specially chose each other, really, because, if we were normies, I guess we'd stay in the city. But I see the rationale behind your proposal.
Yes. And like, sorry if I'm like waffling on a bit. We've not exactly like me and my friends haven't got like a proper constitution or anything quite yet. We're basically just working on like all the soft ideological points, and then we'll work out the hard politics later. Is the plan.
Mm-hmm.
But one sort of hard political point that we figured out is like, well, how do you have separation of church and state if Christ is king? And so it's like, well, that's basically what the steward is for. The steward is the only person that, strictly speaking, needs to be Christian because, well, that what's I guess is like every Christian in Dawnshire would like swear an oath of fealty to Christ himself. Whereas all the like Muslims and Jews or whatever, it's like, no, you don't have to do that. Of course, we wouldn't make you violate your own religion. You just have to swear like a slightly more secular oath of fealty just to the steward, which is sort of like an indirect recognition of Christ's valid authority, and like that way, basically, it's like think people are able to cooperate and work together or whatever without anybody being too uncomfortable theoretically.
Yes.
And another thing that we figured out for like how are you able to have freedom of religion in a or like separation of church and state whilst still paying a lot of attention to religion and operating in a moral way. And what we figured out is like, well, basically is what we figured was like maybe you've got to have like two separate governing bodies, perhaps two separate committees, like almost like two separate congresses or two separate parliaments or something.
An upper and lower house. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So basically what we were thinking is like, well, there could be one where it's like it's elected basically. Just like the people of Dawnshire would vote for like, oh yeah, he seems nice. I want him to be like the local councilman or whatever. To like go be in the great council of Dawnshire, of like the great national council of Dawnshire or whatever, to represent my village or whatever. But then there would also be a religious like the House of Fathers or something, we might call it the House of Patriarchs, which would basically there'd be no voting for who gets in and who isn't in. It would just be the religious leaders, like all the like Catholic priests and Mormon bishops and Protestant pastors and Muslim imams and Jewish rabbis, and like they would basically just gather there basically just to argue about morality all day long. And their political power would basically be they would basically be able to veto a law if they thought the law was immoral, and the elected body would be able to veto a law if they thought it was impractical. Right. So that way the religious people can't do anything stupid, and the political people can't do anything evil.
Okay. I'm just wondering if you've heard of the no-hide.
Sorry if I've been rambling too much.
That's all right. You've given me a few ideas. Have you heard of the no-hide laws?
The
no-hide?
No-hide?
Yes, the no-hide laws. There's 7 of them. They're basically from the Babylonian Talmud, and it's apparently, it's rabbinical. It doesn't come from the Torah, but it says the 10 Commandments are for Jews only, and Gentiles have a lower standard of morality, and they have to conform to the 7 no-hide laws. And they don't have to keep the Sabbath, but they have to have laws that forbid murder, forbid theft, forbid sexual immorality, forbid the eating of an animal while it's still alive, have the positive obligation of establishing a court and legal system, and also have to forbid idolatry and blasphemy. And so there would be 7 of these laws that righteous Gentile nations would have. And that would be, their way of telling, which Gentile nation is righteous and which Gentile is righteous.
Yes, well, that's actually something. It's Ben Shapiro has actually talked about that. That sounds a bit familiar. I once heard him explain it in one of his podcast things as basically being as being a Jew and being a righteous person is like effectively in his interpretation of that, in his particular opinion, is like, well, it's two different things. Being Jewish is only really for Jews, but there's this other standard of morality that like a Gentile person, if they wanted to be righteous, would be supposed to follow. And I'm very interested that you've like, I'm very glad to actually know what that properly is now. I can research into it a bit more in depth.
Oh, good. And I'm saying, they actually have, the power to sort this mess out. And this is what I propose. And they don't want to do it, and I think it's because they're scared and they don't want to be upsetting their Christian overlords. But what I propose to them, to Orthodox rabbis, is for them to rank the 4 Gentile religions. So,
yeah, seems fair enough. Yeah. Well, I mean, I can see why they would hesitate to do it, though. That there's already a huge number of conspiracy theories about Jews running the world. That I can see why they would perceive it as being against their best interest to do such things.
Yes, and I'm saying, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So you might as well do the right thing, and
Yes.
it's a continuing obligation, because if you accept the narrative of the Abrahamic God, it's like, well, he created the world, and then he flooded the world, and then he gave the Torah to Moses, and this divided humanity between Jews and Gentiles, and there must have been a reason, and and this is the tension between Jews and Gentiles, and whether we like it or not, it's like, well, if we want to worship the Abrahamic God and get the benefits of so doing, that's a narrative we have to accept, whether we like Jews or not. It's because if you don't like Jews, then you are questioning God's wisdom, and well, how very dare you,
Mm-hmm.
and
that all seems rather fair enough.
yes.
I would be, but of course, say from my personal religious, I don't know about your religious background, but from my personal one, the thing that I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure if you asked like a bishop in my church, which is a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints,
Mm-hmm.
Mormon, like I said before,
Mm-hmm.
LDS,
Mm-hmm.
like basically about the status of the Jews, of like, are the Jews still God's chosen people? The thing we'd say is like, yeah, but he's not gonna, like, until they properly recognize Jesus, he's not gonna do as much for them as he did in the past, which I guess is what you might say, that we believe something, I guess I would say, somewhat similar to what many Orthodox Christians believe, of like, yeah, the Jews are better than nothing, but they're sort of incomplete. And the proper nation of Israel is not the current one that exists in the Levant. The proper nation of Israel would be like our church, and the proper, like, true, like, Hebrew people are not those who are relate to it by blood. It is the people who have who have made, like, who are basically like deeply committed Christians and members of my church in particular. But I do think it's interesting when you bring up like the Noahide laws or whatever, because that, sorry if I'm going off on a random tangent, but that reminds me of like even in the New Testament, that is mentioned rather indirectly when Christ's apostles, basically after Jesus is dead and they're off evangelizing the gospel,
Mm-hmm.
there were like some Jewish Christians that were being rather mean to some Roman Christians, and they were like, oh, you've got to circumcise yourselves. And the apostles are like, well, that doesn't seem quite right. So they had a bit of a they had a bit of a little, like, rabbinical debate or whatever among themselves, and then the decision they basically came to was like, nah, the Roman Christians can maintain most of their Roman customs. It's just that they, like, they should not, basically just is they need to increase their standard of sexual morality. They need to stop fornicating, and they'll basically be good.
Yes, I thought Paul said there's no need for Christians to practice circumcision anymore.
Well, I believe it, yeah. Paul, of course, did say that, because, yeah. But I believe, but that is a somewhat Paul specific thing. I believe that what was said more generally by the other apostles in general was non-Jewish Christians do not need to circumcise their children. Sort of by omission, that could be interpreted as Jewish Christians still ought to, because they are still like, well, their people should maintain their customs in the same way that Roman Christians should maintain Roman customs. And presumably this applies to every culture on earth, is basically you get rid of the things that, like, there are certain specific core inflexible doctrines, and basically as long as those are being conformed to, all the peripheral stuff doesn't matter. So like, what's it like theoretically, if someone managed to convert like all of Arabia to Christianity, you wouldn't completely scrap Sharia law. You would you would raise the age of consent like to 14 or something, because I don't because I don't think that a country where the age of consent is currently about 9 would accept anything higher than 14.
I don't think there's anywhere in the world that has an age of consent that is 9. I mean, the really truly Sharia-based laws are saying, well, there is no age of consent because the age of consent implicitly says it's okay to have sex outside marriage, and saying,
So I suppose you're right. I suppose you're right. The thing that I should be saying is what is an appropriate marriageable age, or whatever. And I guess is like
age, well, in Mohammedan times it was when a female starts her menses, and that could be whatever age, and it could be as early as 9. But I think even in Iran now, it does say that the age of marriage is 18, and if you want it to be younger, you have to get the consent of the parents or the guardian or something like that.
Yes, which basically makes the law about as strict as it is in America, because in America you can get people married under the age of 18 as long as the parents give consent. So like, that is a bit of a thing. It does seem a bit absurd now to see people criticizing Iran when Iran has literally got virtually identical laws to America in most respects.
They live in sin and they take the pill. I mean, people think, they're all these sort of oppressed women who can't, and because Iran is also worried about its birth rate. It's gone down, and I'm saying it's because of the pill.
Yes. And that actually does remind me of something. Was I used to have we had to stop talking because her parents were a bit upset with her, but I actually had a Muslim friend on Instagram. She is from Qatar, and something she would often complain to me about was her father's drinking and her father's pornography addiction.
Oh dear, just like the West.
Yes.
Yes, I guess the internet is our playground wherever we are in the world.
Yes. Anyway, but it's like not even Iran is safe, damn it.
Well, which is why people there needs to be a universal standard for these things, because basically the problem is that whatever your race, if you suffer from degeneracy, which I think the West does, and it spreads its degeneracy to non-Western parts of the world, because a lot of non-Western countries blindly follow the West, thinking, oh, these are the most powerful, coolest people in the world, and we'll just...
I'm not sure they're going to keep doing that for much longer. I feel like it's not going to be like... I feel like at some point in the next 100 years... I don't know that Africa will necessarily blossom, but at the very least, Africa will be less miserable than the Western world. Like in about a century from now, I feel like people from the Western world will be sending their children to study in Nigeria. I feel like.
well, they're going to have they have a youth bulge, and youth bulges are associated with great change imperialism or industrialization or
Yeah.
great wealth. And the joke is that the industrial and post-industrial nations have basically shot themselves in the foot because
Yes.
they don't want to reproduce anymore because and I think the problem is they send women to work, and working mothers just don't have time to have children, and they don't want to
Yeah.
because they can't cope. And therefore
Yeah.
the solution must be
Yes. Not.
segregation of the gender roles.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes. That actually is something that. Yes. Well, of course, another thing that I'd also advocate, is like people are like, oh, men should have suffrage, or oh, only women should be able to vote, whatever. It's like, no, no, no. The solution that I'd come up with is people have got to be married specifically, and like the husband and wife should only get one vote between them, and they both need to agree on who they're voting for.
Yes.
But the thing is, like, that vote should be more or less valuable depending on the number of children they have. So I guess maybe it's not that they only get one vote, but like they should get one vote per each kid that they have, or something, or something like that.
Yes, I would have a system of if you're a
Because
net
yeah,
contributor, if you pay if you pay taxes, direct taxes, then you get to vote. If you don't, then you don't get to vote. And as for women, the only reason why they might vote differently from men is if they live separately, But if they live, with men, then they would care about the economic interests of their husband or their father or their
yes,
son. But but if they live separately from them, because men won't marry them or sire children by them, then they'll be bitter and angry and want to encourage
yes.
immigration because they want to maybe find better men from the immigrant men that they want to they vote to.
Yes, which
enter
is a
their
slightly
country.
backwards way of doing things. It's like no, if you've not got anything good here, you don't import something else. You export yourself. If you're dissatisfied with your local whatever. But of course, I guess that's a masculine way of thinking, isn't it? Because that's literally what men do. Like when a man is dissatisfied with women in his home country, he travels to Asia or Africa or something, and he finds better women elsewhere.
Yes, and
I guess there's almost a certain sense of like feminine entitlement or something, with like these women that like they feel entitled to a man, therefore they feel they have the right to import thousands of young men from across the world in order to find the one that they prefer. They don't feel I guess the duty or something in the way that a man would to go and pursue. But I guess that's just ordinary gender dynamics, isn't it?
I think so because there is a saying about men are endogamous in that they want to marry women of their own race. I don't know how true it is, and women are
I don't think that's
exogamous.
true at all. Well, maybe it's not. No, I
But I
think that
think
depends
they're
on
both
status.
exogamous.
I feel like that depends on status. I think that I don't know. I actually am a white man who's very strongly attracted to non-white women, so my opinion on that is rather muddied. I don't think that that's true, but that's just because it isn't for me personally, and I suppose that might contaminate my ability to judge it
Yeah, I'm
objectively.
not saying what I'm saying is true. I'm sure all kinds of men and women who do find
Yeah, we're
people
making
outside their race
generalizations. We're making
exotic and attractive
generalizations.
and interesting, because there is this thing of familiarity of contempt. It's like I already know what you're like and you're boring.
Yeah,
I want
yeah.
something new and um, uh, uh, so I guess really the problem is gender relations. Because
Yes.
it's marriage is not a good bargain for men, and men don't necessarily want to marry every woman they have sex with. That is really and
Oh, well, when you say that, that actually reminds me. That was a solution that I came up with at one point. Is like because like in the black community in America, for instance, since the 1960s, there's basically been an explosion of like single motherhood, basically, and fatherlessness. And one solution that I came up with at one point was literally, it's like, this guy has fathered 16 different children by 5 different women. Why doesn't he just marry all 5 women? Wouldn't that be the moral thing to do?
Can't afford to be, because he can't afford. I think a lot of you ask Muslim men and you talk to them. It's like, I don't want 4 wives. No, thank you. Please don't do this to me. People think it's having sex with 4 women. No, you have to pay for their stuff, and
Yeah, well, and of course, I guess that is that reminds me of something I heard a Muslim man say once, which is like, oh, you don't understand, polygamy is feminist because it gives the man the responsibility. He needs to take care of the women he is married to. He needs to take care of his harem. Therefore, these women, they'll be better off than they would be, because it's like you can't escape the fact that I'm doing a terrible impression. He's Canadian. I'm making him sound like a Jew from the New England. But anyway, but no, it's like you don't understand. It's men, they're pigs. A man is going to have sex with about 4 women anyway. So you might as well force him to marry those 4 women so that he has to provide for them. So that he's not going to be a cold-hearted bastard and let them all die in the cold.
yeah, he's not just going to pump and dump them, and he's going to pay for their kids, and it's like, whenever I work back, all these situations, like, the British are complaining about all these immigrants,
Yes.
and because they fought 2 ruinous world wars, they lost their men, and a lot of
Yes.
women after the war had to die spinsters because.
Well, the thing is, it's not just that they lost their men; it's that they lost their best men.
Yes.
Well, maybe not quite their best men. They lost most of the decent men. It's like you're gonna get like out of war, the men who survive that is like you're gonna get like a small number of the greatest men, and you're gonna get a small number of like random men, and like all the like you're gonna get the top and the bottom, and the middle's basically hollowed out. It's like when these guys come back. And like the guys that remained basically, and they're sort of like the bottom, and then the guys that survive, and they're sort of the top. The middle is hollowed out because the middle is basically the people who die in war. And but of course no, with the British way of doing warfare, actually, it's not even that, because you very much have the tradition of like basically putting the officer corps in danger on purpose for morale reasons. It's even the top that gets killed a lot as well.
Yeah,
I
don't think they knew what they were doing. It was just basically, we don't want the Germans to dominate the continent, and we're going to throw everything at them. And we will play dirty, and it will be total war. And well, the long and short of it is that the Europeans destroyed themselves, and the center of Western power passed to the Americans, and I don't think the Americans are grown up enough to deal with all this.
Well, partially it's that, but partially it's also the fact that, partially because we're descended from the British, we have the mentality of an island people who are insulated from all their enemies, but also because we dominate our entire continent. Both of our neighbors are too friendly and too weak to pose any threat to us. So, we practically, we almost exist as an island, insulated from all threats, and we're also huge, and we're also wealthy. So it's like this weird combination of like having, like being appropriately proud because we've done some great things, but also being inappropriately proud because we're not quite as great as we think we are. And as a result, we basically think that like we're not used to actually like thinking of other countries as like real places. We're used to treating them like exotic restaurants.
Yes. I don't know if you have an interest in what Dugin is saying. He's the political philosopher of Russians, and I think you'll find it quite interesting what he makes of this culture war as well as a military war between Slavs and Anglo-Saxons. He's basically racialized it in this way.
Yeah.
And his analogy is that, land empires will survive because we got our land, the hard way. It's marine empires
Yes.
like Britain and Carthage and America. They suddenly rise, and they will
They
suddenly
explode, they conquer half the world, and then they implode and they're
yes,
dead.
yes, but
That
because
seems fair enough.
and that's what he's saying, basically.
Well,
But
it's because you can't homogenize that way, because it's quite difficult to travel over water. You're not going to have a homogeneous empire over the water the way that you do over land.
but all empires are multicultural. I mean, that is the thing.
Well, yes, but like with the Marine Empire, it's like it's not going to be as like all those countries aren't going to be as insulated as they were before. Like even if you still have technical freedom of movement, you don't have practical freedom of movement the way that you do with a land empire.
Because it's a scattered empire.
Yes. It's like Russia, for instance. Like the reason why Russia and Ukraine are so similar, and the reason why there are so many Russians who sort of feel entitled to Ukrainian territory is because, Russia and the Soviet Union were land-based empires. They were able to sort of mix and homogenize because even though they did not have technical freedom of movement, you needed a passport to move from state to state within the Soviet Union. They still had practical freedom of movement. It wasn't too hard to hop in your crappy little Soviet jalopy and drive 50 miles to a neighboring country. It's like as
I
a
mean,
result,
the Russians
yeah.
have always regarded Ukraine as part of them.
Yes.
So
Well, it's basically their
backyard.
ancestral territory. It's literally where the Kievan Rus come from originally. The Russian people were born from basically a hybridization of the Rus Vikings from Norway with the Kievan Slavs from Ukraine. And they traveled eastward and they conquered all the land that is basically Russia today. And, like Kiev was literally like Russia, the old Russian Empire used to have three great cities. It was Kiev, Moscow, and Petersburg.
Oh.
It's literally like what's it like in America, today we've got New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. Russia without Russia, or well, not even just as that, like New York, Boston, it's like a Russia without Kiev. The way that I've had it explained to me is kind of like an America without Boston or an America without Chicago. It's just not quite complete.
Which is why they're fighting tooth and nail to keep it. And
yes.
And and they want Mariupol, which is
yes. That's for more strategic reasons, as far as I'm aware, though. That's just, it's not necessary.
In the east. I mean, they don't want
yes.
Kiev. I mean, it's like, the
yeah, well, there's a lot of historical baggage that would... There are historical baggage-related reasons why they would... ideological reasons why they would want Kiev, but it's not a practical military target. It's not a tactical target in the way that Mariupol is.
Yes.
From what I'm aware, we're literally two armchair generals who know virtually nothing. I believe that there's a very good. It may ironically be a Chamberlain quote about like faraway countries about which we know nothing, or something. Neville Chamberlain, not the most courageous person, but at least he was a bit intelligent.
Well,
probably be a better prime minister than Jobo today.
Yes. I mean,
or Bojo, sorry.
Chamberlain was... Well, I mean, people make him sound like, the villain of the piece, but really...
It's like, no, he was just...
The British didn't want another war so soon after the last one,
Yeah, like, he was maybe... he was not a villain, like, for all the things you can criticize, and I say this admittedly as an American, I don't know it nearly as intimately as you surely do, but, like, it seems to me that, like, you could maybe tar and feather him as a coward, but you certainly could not tar and feather him as a villain, like... He was not doing it for evil reasons. He was doing it because he didn't want to get hurt.
Yeah. And really, when you think about it, Poland is really Germany's backyard. I mean, people don't sort of take
Yeah,
that
but
into
Poland at
account.
least has a long history, like Poland, Lithuania, and all kinds of stuff, and the Winged Hussars. Like, there's a real identity of Poland in a way that there's not with Ukraine.
Well, Poland did have a Saxon king as recently
Oh, that
as
too as well.
yes, the
They're like,
1600s, I think.
yeah. So, like, ironically, there's also like a weird ethnic link there with the Saxons. I guess that'd be German, wouldn't it?
Yes.
But of course, like making that argument of like the Saxons is like, well, by that standard, is not Britain a part of Germania because of the Tudor dynasty?
Well, the Tudors were actually Welsh, as far as I know, but
No, not the Tudors. Who was it? Who was it? What's the current dynasty
oh
actually? What
oh
were they
oh
called?
Saxe Gotha, the Windsor, the House of Windsor,
Yeah, what did the Windsors call themselves before the
Saxe
World Wars?
Gotha, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So like, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't
I
know.
mean they're
My
all
my my
related to
dad
each
actually
other.
grew up. My dad grew up in a city called Cleveland, which is like Cleveland, Ohio, in America, which has got like a large Polish population. So I actually do have some like concern about that. I do actually have some love of the Poles in a way that I don't for Ukrainians. So sorry if I defend Poland too vigorously.
The Poles really hate Russians. I mean, I've spoken to a few Polish nationalists. It's like the hatred of Russians is, off the scale.
Well, like for the same reason the Ukrainians do. The Soviet Union literally perpetrated genocide in Poland.
During the collectivization or something?
No, not just that. It was like literally like during the purges. It was like I think there was like one event where they killed, or no, I think it was actually during World War II. Actually, it was
The massacre
like the
of the
Russian.
officers in Katyn or something.
No, not quite. I think it was like 6,000 or like 60,000 random civilians that they like shot in one day and buried in one mass grave. It was
Ooh.
so scandalous that the Nazis actually used it. Like the Nazis propagandized it, of course, because why wouldn't you in their position?
Uh-huh.
But the Soviets later like admitted it being true. They're like, yeah, the Nazis caught us on this one. We actually did do this horrible thing.
Yes, I think, all empires would be up to their, waist in blood, you know.
Well, yeah, but the British Empire, like what's the most horrible thing the British Empire ever did, right? Because like it's like people criticize the British Empire, but then it's like, what did they do? It's like, oh, they stopped widow burnings, and it's like, seems a little heroic to me. Seems you shouldn't criticize them for stopping people sacrificing widows at the husband's funeral.
Yes, sati, but I suppose I was thinking of something more recent than that.
I don't know. It's like,
I guess the Opium Wars.
yeah, you know what? Yeah, I think that's actually an excellent example. Now you bring that up is like, yeah, the one awful thing that Britain did was they pushed drugs on the Chinese,
Yeah,
but
and
like, yeah,
I mean the thing
that's
is,
not quite the same thing as the ethnic genocides perpetrated by Nazi Germany or the Soviet Union.
I suppose, well, it's really, it's like harm done. You think harm done to
Yeah,
others or harm done to oneself. And I think the
yeah,
British actually harmed themselves more than they ever harmed anyone else.
yeah.
So, and it's a
Oh
shame
gosh, now
because if you think,
this has all been one great tangent. Now, I don't mean to interrupt your point, but I just realized it's like, we were talking about Dawnshire a while back, and we've completely now we're like it's fun, but like, would you like to get back on topic or something? Or
you, of course,
no, I've not. Oh, I feel sorry about interrupting your point now because I don't necessarily know that I have much to say about Dawnshire. I guess it's just like the goal or whatever of Dawnshire. It's like it's like we just want to make well. No, okay, so I guess to try and work things back, it's like we talked about all this. Why did we get into this tangent? It's because we were talking about,
The rules.
Was it something about the innate corruption of the state or something?
Well, I think we were talking about the rules, and I think we did mention
Oh yes, the rules, and then that.
religion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the questions I do want to, and then we mentioned the no hide laws, and I was wondering, would you ever read the Quran? Because because you were talking about the rules, and I think, well, there's the Quran. I know you don't like it, but maybe
Well,
you'll
I
get a
don't
few
know. No.
ideas
I never
from
said
that
that.
book.
I never said that I don't like it.
I kind of get. I mean, you want your religion, and there's another religion that is not yours, and it's.
Well, yeah, but I've got no beef with Islam. I wouldn't mind reading it. It's just that well, I've actually read bits of it occasionally, just like as a bit of like, well, because I've mentioned to you before, I sort of love academic stuff. One interesting thing was I was reading a bit of it online once. Basically, it was like, what is the Muslim version of the Garden of Eden? And one of the interesting sort of like anecdotal things that had been mentioned by the editor of the website was, according to the Quran, Satan was the first racist.
Really?
Yes, because Satan, Ablis or whatever his proper
Iblis,
name
I
is,
think.
Ablis. Yeah. Anyway, like the in the Quran, Satan rebels against God because God like intends to promote human beings to a higher rank than the jinn, and Satan is the chief of the jinn. So and Satan's basically, it's like, oh, us you made from fire, and these lowly creatures you make from earth, or was it earth or blood?
Clay, maybe.
Clay, right? Clay. These lowly creatures you make from clay, and us you made from fire. Are they not beneath us? And God is like, no, they're above you. And so Satan basically just has a bit of a racist fit or something, and runs away. And that's the reason
And say,
why.
I will lead them astray at every opportunity, just to.
Yes,
Yes, and I
just to
think.
spite you.
Yes, but basically, for angels, apparently they're all automatons. They have no free will.
Well,
So
if I remember correctly, according to Islamic doctrine, angels and jinn are like a bit different.
okay, but
Like there are, yeah.
I do remember this being mentioned, but I think the qualitative difference between jinn and angels and humans is that humans have free will,
Yeah, humans have
and
got
for
proper
this
free
reason
will,
alone.
whereas, yeah.
Because I guess we have more to struggle with. If you're just created to be obeying God's laws and having
Yeah.
a will of your own, then it's
Yeah.
not a big deal. I mean, to resist temptation, because you don't have any, you wouldn't be tempted.
Yeah. So do you have any particular, well, I guess your whole thing is secular Quranism, so do you have no religion of your own? Are you just...
I come from a Buddhist background.
A Buddhist? Oh, so are you not, you're not white English then? Are
No.
you Indian or something?
No, I'm Chinese.
Oh. You've got such a British accent. I couldn't tell. You sound proper British, not British. So yeah, I couldn't tell that you were an immigrant.
I've been here a while, so I picked up the lingo.
Yeah, but also that just makes me even more like, how old is this person actually? Because because Chinese people, Chinese women in particular, the old joke about like when they're 50, like a Chinese woman in her 50s usually looks better than a white woman in her 30s.
Yes, I think Oriental men say that yes, European women in their 20s are well, surpassing any other race.
Yeah.
But I suppose it swings and roundabouts.
Oh yeah. If that's true, I guess I have no real interest in, like, I don't know. I don't feel entirely comfortable talking about like sexual or whatever. But I guess the beauty of women is not a completely sexual thing.
No, I don't think so.
It is partially aesthetic to a large degree. In terms of aesthetic, I usually will agree. It's like Asian women are probably the best in the world. But in terms of like what suits my own personal tastes or whatever, I tend to find what's it like? Black women as a whole are perhaps not as beautiful as Asian women as a whole, but like this, like the exceptionally beautiful black women, I tend to find more beautiful than exceptionally beautiful white or Asian women.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Because they're more striking and they have, these sort
Yeah.
of bone structure and feet.
Yeah, well, it's sort of robustness, well, I think that is just like a thing that I like, just my own personal taste. It's like I admire things which are robust, not things which are sleek. Like not perhaps things with not so much things which are elegant. Like in terms of elegance, Asian women are certainly the most beautiful, but in terms of robustness, I would say, well, I'd say black women. Well, I think you would have to say black women because, like in Africa, there's a lot more variety. Because certainly I would say that there are some African ethnicities which rival the Chinese or rival the Asians, the East Asians for elegance. I think it's the Nuer or somebody. Like there's these like people, like even the women are nearby to 7 feet tall, and they're all ridiculously slim.
Yeah, they're all different in physique. I mean, the East
Yeah.
Africans and the West Africans and
Yeah. Well, like the people, like for instance, like the sort of Semitic influence that you get about the northeastern part of Africa, like nearby to Ethiopia. You've got people that have got like European, they look almost like people from India because they've got black skin and black hair, but they've got a very European looking skeleton, European looking nose, European looking eyes. And then there's some other areas where people have very almond looking eyes, sort of almost Chinese looking, Asian looking. I tend to admire that somewhat as well because the thing that I guess I always found most striking about Asian women or most attractive about Asian women is like the eyes. Maybe it's because I'm American and we've got this sort of stereotype of like beautiful native women with beautiful almond eyes or something, but like, yeah.
Yeah, I think people just sort of enjoy I don't know if you know that in Japan, if you're blonde and blue-eyed, you can, work in the
Oh, yeah,
club
well, like,
and you can
yeah.
get, all these Japanese men, eager to practice their English on you just because you
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not exactly blonde haired. My hair is a rather light brown, sort of dirty blonde. I've often heard it called. I don't quite look Aryan, but I definitely look Nordic. I've been told that I have like icy blue eyes, or other people have told me I have fiery blue eyes. It's like guess it depends on what I'm wearing, depends on the contrast.
Yes. I think it's just
but
the women
Yeah.
in these clubs.
Oh yeah, that too as well. As women, what's it like? Men tend to pay more attention to shapes, whereas women tend to pay more attention to colors.
Is that true? I don't even know.
Well, yes, that's it. Well, like people have studied it actually. Women are better at determining color, and even just more effeminate men are better at determining color. And like it's thought that that's why Pollock, or not Pollock, who was that? Was it Andrew Pollock or something? The famous American painter. He made the Campbell soup cans.
Oh, I can't remember his name now, but it's on the tip of my tongue. Yes, I can't remember.
Anyway, but he was gay, and so it's thought very commonly that perhaps his sort of like him being gay and quite sort of flamboyant and effeminate was one of the reasons why he was such a good painter, because he's basically just unusually good with colors.
I think men suffer more. A higher percentage of men suffer from color blindness than women, isn't it? Isn't that okay?
Yes, that as well. But of course, all this stuff sort of makes sense when you take into consideration hunting versus gathering. Like plants can vary. Like two plants of the same species, like two blueberries, can vary widely in shape. But like they could be completely different shape, completely different size, but they're going to be the exact same color. Whereas with, like with wild game, like two different rabbits might be two relatively different colors, but they're going to be the exact same shape. It's like for identifying camouflaged animals, it's more useful to have shape-based vision, whereas for identifying edible or poisonous plants, it is more useful to have color-based vision.
Right. It's
And
Andy
or like,
Warhol,
yeah,
by the way.
Andy Warhol, yeah, Warhol.
Yes.
Something that I've commonly heard is that Andy Warhol, supposedly one of the reasons why he was such an excellent painter was because he was gay, and in a rather flamboyant, effeminate way, and that basically, like, it's thought that the same reason he was gay is the same reason he was so good with colors or something.
Well, I mean, they do say that gay people tend to be artistic, and
Yes.
I guess to be artistic.
Oh gosh, well, there's a Family Guy joke about that actually. There's like an Italian family having dinner, and one of them is trying to explain that his brother, or not his brother, that a member of the family is gay without the mom catching on, because that would, shock her. So like what he's saying is like, you know how he is. He's different. He's autistic. He likes to play in the dirt. And his brother's just like, what? You mean he's gay? And the mother's just like, what? And then he's like, no, Ma, he's creative.
Right.
Like that's literally the punchline of the joke. Is like, no, he's not gay. He's just creative.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. Well, I mean, he did go. Well, he wasn't really a great painter, was he? I mean, he didn't. It was just sort of modern art. I mean, it didn't require great skill, did it?
You have to go through like the time period, because effectively what he is he's one of those people who could make great art when he wanted to, but because he was living in the modern age and he got a bit depressed, so instead he made like emotional stuff that that doesn't seem too skillful by modern standards.
Okay, I did go through an exhibition of his, but
yeah, like the stuff that he, like when he was a teenager and he would draw like pictures of garbage, but they're almost photorealistic looking pencil pictures of garbage. Like I believe that have you heard of the academic agent?
Yes, I've been exchanging tweets with him today.
Oh. Yeah. Anyway, Academic Agent and Mr. D on YouTube did they did the Andy Warhol special for like, I think they've got like 60 hours almost, or not 60, probably about like 10 hours of footage, basically, of them talking about Andy Warhol. And like at the beginning of the series, they go into Andy Warhol's early career, and Mr. D, because he's quite a misogynistic homosexual, jokes about a picture of an empty Campbell soup can sort of sitting on top of a empty Coke bottle that Andy Warhol had drawn when he was a teenager, and Mr. D says, "Oh, it's the perfect woman, isn't it? Because it's curvy and it provides food."
Okay, right.
Yes.
Yes, I mean, I'm looking at pictures of him. I mean, he's sort of famous for all the different colours of the same object. That's, I guess.
Well, and again, that would be like what we were talking about before. I mean, this has been a delightful conversation. It is rather time for me to have lunch though, and I do need to make some dinner preparations. I think this was lovely though, and I would like to return later, and I hope that it was not too scatterbrained and random for your audience.
Not at all. I enjoyed it very much, and it's always good to not be too rigid about the subject matter, because
yes,
the first conversation is always a time to get to know each other's interests.
Yes. Now I've also got some. I've got a rather sort of a bit of a co-host, sort of like my partner in the whole sort of Dawnshire adventure is a guy called Englander.
Right.
He's not really got a YouTube channel of his own, but if you watch my podcast, the Truck Cast on YouTube,
right,
you should. I'll give you a link, I guess, afterward.
Okay, I'll have a look.
He's basically my co-host. He's basically on all the podcasts with me, and yeah. So I guess so we just about signed off. Would you now about an appropriate time to end the live stream?
Yes, fine. You need to go chop your onions, and I
Yes.
hope we can have another talk with you. And what was his name again? This
Englander,
Englander.
my co-host.
Okay,
Well, I suppose I should do a bit of shilling though before I leave.
go on.
Okay, so if anybody, I realize I didn't necessarily make the best case for Dawnshire here, but if anybody is at all interested in it, there is a Dawnshire Discord server. If you comment, what's it? I will. What's it? If you comment in the after this live stream is over and is just uploaded as an ordinary video, uh, I will leave you an invite. So I suppose as a Claire, could you please, if it's not too much to ask,
Not at all.
let
Give
me
the
know
links
if
and I'll put it in the
anybody.
description.
Yes, all right. I will do that. I will let me see, get the invite and let's see, copy. I'll be sending it in the DMs on Instagram right now.
Mm-hmm.
There. Can you see it now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So is that everything? Is there anything? Well, I suppose this is your YouTube channel, so I suppose you already like shill whatever things you like.
Yes, I wanted to ask you how you do it, because I can't seem to get the hyperlink when I post links in Instagram. So how do you?
Oh
do
well,
it?
I just copy and paste. I have to get YouTube. I have to get Instagram on my computer. It doesn't work when I use Instagram on my phone. I can't copy paste, but I I use the old mouse, and I put the blue bar over it, and I put it in the search bar.
Okay. I must be doing something wrong about not getting the proper app or something. All right then. I'm glad you could come and join us. And
Yes, and I'm glad I joined you. I think later this week and maybe next week or something we could do this again. It was a very enjoyable time, and you know what? Maybe you could be a guest on it on my podcast some other time. Maybe if you have a Discord account.
I do.
Okay, yes. Well, I would love to invite you to the Dawnshire server. We try our best to have a fun time and sort of advance the ideology and whatever. And even if you don't necessarily strictly want to work on Dawnshire in specific, we try to be a bit traditional and a bit conservative in general.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah. So yeah.
I should invite my occasional streaming partner Vincent Bruno to join you. No, I'm only kidding. He would be very disruptive indeed, but
I'm sure that he would be.
yes. All right then. Well, thank
Yeah,
you.
actually, no, we do have, well, as long as he kept it, because we do have an area called Speaker's Corner on the server. As long as he kept all his disruptiveness in Speaker's Corner, I wouldn't mind. That's basically what it's for.
Okay. I think it'd be fun.
Yes.
I'll mention it to him. I'll send him the link, and then well, you can always make him go if you don't like his contributions.
Yes. I have a terrible habit of making these long goodbyes. Well, I suppose this ought to be the proper end now, shouldn't it?
All right then. Okay. Goodbye, and thank you for coming.
Yes, well, I'm glad to have been here. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
See next time.
See you next time.
Yeah, see you next time. Next week, maybe.
All right. Take care.